We are going cross-cultural for dinner tonight. That's salami, cheese, sun-dried tomatoes, and calamatas. So an antipasto on a tortilla with sriracha and a Guinness. This is my antipasto wrap. Good morning, friends, family, total strangers. Today's video is about my tent. This is the Six Moon Designs Gatewood Cape. There's not really a whole lot of reviews out there on the old YouTubes for the Gatewood Cape, and the only ones that are there are pretty much people who got it and set it up in their backyard for the first time. So I just had this and used it for 16 straight days on the PCT, setting it up, breaking it down every day. So I do feel like I have enough experience with it to talk about it. I don't want my channel to be a review channel, but there are just a couple of pieces of gear that I took that there's very little out there about that I figured I might as well do a review on. So today's is the Gatewood Cape. It is a rain gear. It's a poncho, essentially. It's technically a cape because it does have armholes. So there's holes that your arms come out. And so they're uncovered about to the forearm, mid-forearm when it's raining. So I'll just tuck my jacket up under that sort of thing. And but before we get into it as a poncho, let's talk about it as a tarp. It is essentially a tarp to camp under. And I've never done tarp camping before. This was my first experience. I should note that you can combine this with the Serenity net tent to make kind of a two-wall tent, but I'll talk about that a little later. First, let's just talk about the Gatewood Cape. It weighs 11 ounces, which is super light. I actually have the ground sheet in here right now, which takes up some of the space, but I just want to take that out and show you just how small this is. (11 ounces, about the size of a soda can, a little bigger than that. Super packable. Be great for day hikes, for having rain gear and then an emergency shelter if you need it, or a go bag for a prepper or something. But I want to talk about it as a tent for through hiking, essentially. So you're going to notice some difference in some of the footage. Some is gray skies, some is blue skies. I tried to film this video twice yesterday to disastrous, totally disastrous, but I am going to use some of the footage from yesterday, so that will be mixed in here. So I took a time lapse of setting it up yesterday, so I am going to show that now. I will say I will also have a quick video inside showing its length and everything, and then I will also give you a tour around the outside of it. So here that comes. That gives you an idea of how much room I have. Pretty decent if set up right. Oh, my hat fell off. I have, yeah, I could go more this way if I needed to, but yeah, I have decent amount of room here, some room down there. And if, you know, I think this shelter is for about 6 foot or shorter. And if you don't set it up right, the tent will whap you in the face in the night. So the first thing to note is that it doesn't come all the way to the ground here in the front. But like even in the heavy rain with crazy wind, that I still didn't get wet from that. So that worked out pretty well. But you do want to put that part away from the wind. so you don't get wind coming in underneath. This teepee style tent does shed the wind very well, so I feel like it works a lot better than a 2 trekking pole tent or a freestanding tent for shedding the wind. If it was super windy, I might stake these all the way to the ground in the back here, the wind side. But yeah, overall this tent held up very well against the wind, and it did pretty darn good against the rain as well. Did have some condensation issues though. So yeah, first thing you'll notice is there's a little pocket here. So this is actually what it stuffs into itself. So this is what it stuffs into. So there's no separate stuff sack. It just stuffs right into itself. And so I put my glasses up there and stuff when I'm sleeping. Yeah, kind of the longer you make your pole and the more you cant it out, kind of the more space you have to sit upright. But I'm currently sitting upright right now. Yeah, so let's get right into my review of it. I really liked it. You know, this is kind of like a good introduction to tarp camping because it's kind of like halfway in between a tent and a tarp. It has the zipper and everything, which a tarp doesn't have, so it has the doors. And it doesn't really take the learning curve and skill level that a real tarp, that's setting up a tarp, takes. So, you know, you don't really need to know any knots. You don't really need to know, you know, all these different formations to set it up. There's just one formation. You just have to learn how to do that right, which I will say was a bit of a struggle. However, Darwin on the Trail, he has a big hiking YouTube channel, just did a video on setting up a 1 trekking pole tent, and it applies to this, and it's great advice. So I will try to link that in the description if I remember. But yeah, essentially what he says is to get the two corners, the 2 back corners really tight, get them tight from each other, and then set up the trekking pole with the line going out and try to form a perfect triangle, tight, going all 3 directions, perfect tightness. And then once you do that, then you stake out the other stakes, and it's no problem. And so yeah, that worked out great. I had 2 big days of rain. The first 2 days pouring right off the bat. So I got it tested as rain gear and as a shelter, which I was not expecting, honestly. I was thinking, you know, I had only set this up a couple of times before that, and I had only actually backpacked with it once for one night before hitting the trail. Don't follow that example. But so I was just thrown right into the fire, not really knowing how to set this thing up well, and it did good for me. You know, it rained those first 2 days. The first day I just kind of waited. When we got to camp, it was pouring, so I just waited for a few minutes, waited for a lull, and then it lulled up. So then I set it up and got inside, and there you go. And then in the next day, I kind of did the same thing. So you just, to set it up in the rain, you just kind of wait for a little lull and then set it up. I did have an umbrella with me, which I could have used, but I didn't have to. My umbrella was mostly for the sun, but yeah, I really didn't need it. And then I had a couple days of huge, oh, there's a nail. Jeez. Put that in the garbage. Yeah, there was a couple of days of super high winds. On the 5th day, I had crazy wind and rain. And that was nutso. And at the time, I didn't really understand how important it was to secure my tent stakes with rocks. So 4 of my stakes came out in the middle of the night, and the first 3 had come out whatever, and then when the 4th one went, the whole tent went. And this was like at 2 in the morning, and I had enough wherewithal to reach out and grab it before it flew off of me, and I was able to restake it from inside the tent. That's another big advantage of a tarp over a tent, is that I was able to catch that and just restake it without even having to go outside in this torrential rain. torrential rain and windstorm. It was like cold too. It was like 39 degrees, 38 degrees. And so yeah, I woke up the next morning and yeah, it was 3 of my steaks were out, and all night it was just like being in a freaking, it was crazy. It was crazy. But it did hold, and I did learn after that. So the next time I had big wind, I had it staked with rocks and I had no problems. So this is a single wall tent. So I did have some problems with condensation. I think you have a couple of ways you can deal with that. So condensation builds up, and then if you brush up against it in your sleeping bag, now you have a wet sleeping bag. So I used a bivy sack. I'm going to do a separate review on this in a future video. So I'm not going to talk much about the bivy sack, but that's what I used on the PCT. What I intended to use and what I bought is the Serenity net tent. So this is designed to go with the Gatewood cape. It just clips in the corners and up top. And when I set it up, when I was car camping beforehand, I just set it up one time and slept in it. And I got wet because the walls of the net tent were touching the walls of the cape, and that made me decide to not bring it. However, I have learned since then how to set up the cape properly, and I have some better ideas of how to make sure that the net tent doesn't touch the walls. So I am going to show real quick just what it looks like with the net tent setup. So here's the setup with the net tent. Notice the net is in your face a little bit, so if that's something that you can't sleep with, this is probably not the right setup. Although you could figure out a way to rig this to clip up, there's a clip right here. So if you could glue something to your net tent, you could clip it right there and get it out of your face a little more. But yeah, I do fit in this pretty well, good enough. Any taller and this would not work. So this is probably a max of 6 foot if you want to use the net tent. I just had a flock of turkeys fly by while I wasn't filming. Don't! So yeah, I will give the net tent another try in the future. I might even try taking it on a future through hike, maybe in the PCT if I get back on it later this year. If things open up, we'll see how everything goes. But I will give this a further try. I think it would be great for somewhere where it's very buggy. Like if I was to do the AT, I would definitely consider taking this. But you know, bugs aren't too much of a concern as I'm learning. Like it's more about, especially if you're through hiking a trail, it's more about having long pants, long sleeves, and a head net. Because you know, you're spending most of your day hiking, you're doing camp chores, you're cooking, and the actual amount of time you spend in your tent when you're through hiking as opposed to like weekend backpacking is really not much. I think I would use this for weekend backpacking for sure. For a through hike, I really think the bivy was just fine. I would love something that has an enclosed face, like a net over the face. I could wear my head net while I'm sleeping, but then bugs could still get into the bivy. But I'll worry about that down the line. So, yeah, my overall rating of the Gatewood Cape, I would probably give it an A. I was really impressed by how well it stood up to the rain and the wind. Really impressed. I mean, it did better than some of my camping partners who woke up with puddles in their tents. So it worked out pretty well. You know, but I haven't really been fully tested yet. I haven't really been tested when it comes to bugs. But again, that's where, you know, that has more to do with the bivy sack versus net tent than it does with the cape itself. So one of the things I really like about this is how compartmentalized it is. So if you're going somewhere where there's not a lot of bugs and it's fairly warm out, you don't even need to bring a bivy or anything. You could just bring this as your shelter in case it rains. And then you could always have the net tent sent to you later on the trip if you need it, or the bivy sack. Or I like how, yeah, you can just, whatever your needs are for the trip that you're on, you can adjust your setup. You know, if you'd rather have a lighter pack and you don't need a net tent or you don't need a bivy sack. You do need a ground sheet one way or another. I started with Polycro. This is just a super thin, it actually packs down even much smaller than this. There's just a lot of air trapped in it right now. It's just a super thin little, it's almost like a plastic bag. I guess these work great on the East Coast where there's mostly dirt. In the Southern California desert, mine ripped in half on the 4th day and another chunk ripped off of it also on the 4th day. The gravel and sand just shreds this. So about halfway, and I had to use that for a couple more days, just the 2 halves as my ground sheet. And then about halfway through, my friend Jess, who I was hiking with, who I met, she's from British Columbia, she had a piece of Tyvek, a doubled over piece of Tyvek, and she realized she didn't need it, so she folded it over, cut it in half, and gave me the other half. So Tyvek, you can just find it at a construction site. She had a friend who worked construction, and he just cut her off a piece and gave it to her. Works really well. It's much more rugged. It's also heavier. So this piece of Tyvek weighs about 5.5 ounces. This weighs 1.5 ounce. I think for longer trips, I will definitely take the Tyvek. I think it's worth it having that durability. I think it's worth it to have that durability, to have those extra 4 ounces. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more I really need to talk about this. I think it's a great shelter. I think it's a great gateway into tarp camping. This was my first experience tarp camping. I just jumped right in. That might not have been the best choice, but it worked out. Like, I would probably recommend like testing it out more before just jumping into a through hike with it. But it worked out pretty well, and yeah, there's lots of advantages to tarp camping. You know, I would get set up, and then when it's raining, I would just cook my dinner right there. I didn't have to worry about, you know, going outside or venting even, because there's so much open space here that vents. And yeah, I kept dry in high winds and heavy rain, and it did great. So I do want to show some more footage from my PCT hike. So I'm going to show, this is days 3 and 4, I believe, of my through hike. So it was starting at Lake Morena, and then I finished at mile marker 45, I think, on the 4th day. Yeah, let me show you that footage. Oh, that's snow up there. Awesome. Yeah. Sunshine, I like it. First river crossing, so I guess we're just gonna blaze on through. Yeah, feet are wet now. Oh well. The rain the last 2 days, so I didn't even bother. Taking my shoes off. Just blazed right through it, which is, I think, pretty much how PCT hikers handle it for the most part. And then, yeah, I just realized I'm wearing this stupid hood. I've been told by Jax's mom that I look like a cult follower with this hood on. Oh well. At about the 25 mile mark. It is right next to a road, but really pretty out here too, different from what we've been hiking through, this kind of flat grassland with all the oaks. Pretty cool. Day 4, a few miles from Mount Laguna. Not gonna lie, not a very good night of sleep last night. A little on the cold side. Should have brought a warmer sleeping bag, but I'm making it work, so yeah. Awesome. Sunshine. I like it.
Yeah, so it looks like right in the middle of that mountain.
Yeah. Or is that where?
What do you call it? Like have you guys been to San Jacinto?
We've been by it, but never on it.
They have like a tram thing you can take up it.
You go to Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Here we go. Hold up.
Am I really burnt, guys?
Wait, you hold that. No, this. Pinch it.
It is officially not very warm right now. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I should show what it looks like as rain gear. I probably should have put on my backpack to demonstrate, but you kind of saw what that looked like in my last video, days 1 and 2. I was wearing it, and you get to see it in the opening. So, but let me show you that real quick. So this is what it looks like as rain gear. It does have, let me find them. It does have little armholes that your arms come out of. And you will notice that this is way too long. So the only way that it can have enclosed doors as a poncho tarp is if it's this long, and so there's this extra material. There's clips inside that you can clip up the extra material, and a way to do that if it's windy is to run it through your legs. So here it is with the things pinned up through my legs. I think it would actually be easier to pin them up ahead of time and then step through. And this way, because you're going to have your backpack on, and this covers the backpack as well, and it won't blow up over the back of your head like it actually did on my super high wind day. So if you do it like this, yes, it looks a little goofy. Not winning any fashion contest this way, but there it is. So as a poncho, I thought it worked really well as well. I really like a poncho over rain gear. What I kind of have been learning, rain gear just doesn't breathe. Even with the pit zips, it just doesn't breathe. I get sweaty and whatnot. It's really nice wearing a poncho, especially over a backpack, because it really breathes really well. You don't get sweaty inside of there. And, dealing with the wind is a little much sometimes. And I will say you also have to watch out when your rain gear is also your shelter. You have to watch out snagging your rain gear and ripping it. I definitely snagged a few times, but I was very cognizant and careful of that. That I did not rip it. But yeah, that's pretty much my video. I think the huge advantages of the Gatewood Cape is that it's your rain gear and your shelter in 11 ounces, which is ridiculously light. Like even like all the Cuban fiber stuff, like a Cuban fiber tent, is still like 15 or 16 ounces for the most part. And this is 11 ounces. It's not Cuban fiber, and it's your rain gear. And granted, it's not fully enclosed. You have to add, weight on for that. But I just think it's a fantastic option, budget option. It was $135 for the Gatewood cape. It's $125 for the Serenity net tent. But I don't necessarily even think you need the net tent if you're going for through hiking. I think you can get away with a cheap bivvy like this. This was a $30 bivvy, and I will do a review on that in the near future. It's the 3F Ultralight Gear bivvy. It's the zippered one. There's also one that you just slip into. And yeah, I think the Polycro was $10, and you can also buy a Tyvek ground sheet if you just want an official ground sheet, and that's also around $10. I got the Gatewood cape for $108 and the Serenity net tent for $100. They were on sale around Christmas time through Six Moon Designs. So yeah, it's a very affordable shelter. It's also your rain gear. I think it's at least something to think about if you're trying to put together a lightweight setup. There was one other person on the trail who had one, and I think this is important to note. She really regretted that she did not have an adjustable trekking pole. She had the 3-section trekking pole, and she couldn't adjust it, and it was only, I think it was 46 inches long, so this is set up at 50 inches right now. So it really lessened the room. She had problems touching the walls and getting wet and everything. So I would definitely recommend having adjustable trekking poles that go up to at least 50 inches. And if you wanted to even set it up larger, you could just can it out more and have a little more space under the canopy. I should also note that you could just set this up with a stick, cut to length, or you could also set it up if you were day hiking and just carry it as emergency gear and you don't have trekking poles. You could set it up with a stick that's just 46 to 50 inches long. You could also you can buy a little 49-inch 3-section pole to go with this. It's not expensive. I think the aluminum version is like $15. I don't remember how much it weighs. It's just a few ounces. So if you wanted to do that, you could. You should also note that this does not come with tent stakes. You have to buy tent stakes separately, which is most ultralight tents are like that. You have to buy the stakes separately. Yep, I think that's all I really got to say. And then I also did have to seam seal it myself. You buy a little thing of seam seal, or you can get it seam sealed by the factory. I think it's an additional $20 if they seam seal it. It was $7 for the seam seal for me to do it myself. I probably would have done it in the factory. The job certainly would have looked more professional, but it also would have taken a couple weeks longer, so I just did it myself. And it was fine. It wasn't that hard. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, all the fun stuff. Thanks a bunch.